Remember when we installed Minikube early in this course, we installed it using Docker. So this is the container base, which is the preferred, right? So here the same, so VM plus Docker, and this was the preferred way. So for us, because we have a Docker container right here, so let me actually show you. So if I type kubectl, oh, actually, sorry, Docker, and then I was going to say get pods, but Docker PS. So Docker PS, you can see that we have two containers, right? So this container right here is one node, and this is the other node, right? So if I type kubectl get and then nodes, have a look. So we have Minikube and Minikube02. So they reflect in here, right? So in order for us to basically access the application through the node port, we actually have to SSH into these two nodes and then basically see the ports available and try to hit the API, right? So if, for example, if you are using just, so if I go back in here, if you're using VirtualBox, then you don't have to do this step, right? Because you can just say, so basically you can say Minikube and then service, and then the name of the service, and then it'll get a URL that you can then hit, right? You can get a URL that you can then hit. But also we can do it with Docker, but I'm going to show you this in a second. But first, what I want to show you is, so in here, if I say Minikube and then IP, so have a look. So this is the IP for this node in here, and then we have Minikube IP dash and then N for node Minikube and then dash M02, and this is the other IP. So what I want to do is the following. I want to basically say Minikube and then SSH. So we want to SSH into this node right here, and then we want to send a request from this node into this node on that port. So the port that we have is this port, so 30,000, right? So let's just do that. So let's just SSH into node 1 right here. There we go. So we are inside, and now if I type curl, and then let's take this IP address right here, or in fact, let's just take, basically, let's just say localhost first. So I just want you to see that if I say localhost colon 3000 or 30,000, my bad, /API /v1 /customer, enter, check this out. So we have this JSON object right here. So it means that it's working, right? Oops, I've just pressed that again by mistake. So it's working, right? So if I basically clear the screen, and so what we've done was this, right? So we've said curl localhost, and then on this port, which this node port service is exposed. So basically we opened this port on every single node, and currently I've just said localhost, right? So this gives us this JSON payload. Now in here, so this is the IP address for the other node. So I can just clear the screen and then say curl. Oh, actually, let me just press the up arrow. Now instead of localhost, I want to curl the other node. So 192.168.49.3, the same port, enter, and check this out, it works. So this is beautiful, right? So you can see that they can talk to each other. So let me just press Control D for a second, and let me say Minikube SSH. Let's SSH into the other node, so -n, and then mini, and then cube -m02. There we go. And again, if I type, oops, yeah, so basically I can type curl localhost 30,000 and then / API / oops, not AP1 but API, and then v1 / and then customers. Enter. You can see it works. Now let me clear the screen, and what I'm going to do is, instead of saying localhost, so here I'm going to basically hit the node 1. So this has to be 2. So this is the other node. Enter, and you can see that this works. So there you have it. So this is how the node port works. So usually you can see that this is the node IP, and then this is the actual port, as I have explained in the slides, right? So the problem here is that if this node changes, then basically we have a problem, right? Now what I want to show you is, so if I press Ctrl D, let's just come out of that, and if I type kubectl get and then service, so you can see that you've seen how we access this, but now that is actually, cumbersome, and because we are using Minikube, we can actually access our service using Minikube and then service and then the name of the service. So the name of the service is customer and then dash and then node. Now again, this will actually perform some magic behind the scenes because we are using Docker. But if you're not using Docker and you're just using a VM, basically it will give you an IP address that you can then access. So here I can just say -- URL. So if I press enter, you can see that starting tunnel for a service customer node. Because you are using a Docker driver, the terminal needs to be open, right? So now let's just take this URL, Command C, and then if I go back here, paste that, and then this was / API / and then v1 / and then customer. Enter, and you can see that this works. Right, you can see that this was much easier with Minikube. So there you have it. So this is how you access your application using node ports. And from this point onwards, you see that we don't have to use port forward, right? Because now we are accessing the service directly. So we are accessing the service directly. So let me just cancel out of this. And if I reload, this doesn't work anymore. But what I was saying is, so if I press Ctrl L for a second, so this gives us the URL, but if I just run this command, it will open up the web browser. Have a look, you saw that, right? So here, cannot get / because nothing is listening on the root. So here we have to say API, not AP1, API / v1 / customer. There we go, that works. And also we have / and then 1 / and then orders, and this works, right? Because we have this service. So this service, oops, let me just clear this or press Ctrl C. So this has now stopped, and if I type get service, so we have this order service, right? So basically, the customer microservice talks to the order microservice through the cluster IP. So this is internally. And for the customer node, we accessed it using Minikube and then service. But hopefully now we have a complete understanding of how this works. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on.